got questions I want to ask.
Well, you start with the question.
Okay. Well, it's really I kind of want to lean into what you were just talking about, Lynn. So how you got involved in it? Well, obviously, when I was looking through what you're involved in and the article you're doing for us at AI Journal, and then it started leading me to look at the world of film with AI. But you were mentioning like how you not how you got into it, but the early work you were doing, like interactive TV and things with Oracle and then the gaming. What was that all like? What was that? What was that
So,
like?
I had developed a series concept in the called Amerikids, and it was about American teenagers essentially who had done heroic deeds when they were teenagers. So, for example, George Washington would not be an American because he did heroic deeds when he was a grown man. So, this took some research. We found about 15, 16 of these stories throughout American history. And I originally developed it for ABC as weekend specials. Then the ABC got bought out, and so the rights reverted back to me, to the whole series, which was great. And then I went out to LA on another project, and an executive from Fox Children's Television said, "Oh, why don't you write for us? We just acquired Carmen Sandiego." So I said, "Well, what is Carmen Sandiego?" Because I had no idea. And I went to the mall, and
Yeah.
I saw there was a whole series of games on Carmen Sandiego. So I went back to school at UCLA and studied game design and game business. And then we got this grant. We applied to Oracle to get their grant to develop a prototype of the game.
Yeah.
And so we did a prototype of one of the products called Pony Express Rider. So if you
Okay.
know anything about the Pony Express, it was during the Civil War, and it only lasted 18 months, but it was sending messages via the horse and the Pony Express Rider from fort to fort, all the way from St. Joe, Missouri to California and back. So it was designed to send messages and in the mail all in 10 days, and was done by teenage boys primarily. So they were soliciting for, you had to be over 16 and an orphan preferred.
Yeah.
So in case you got killed, nobody would care. Uh, uh, so that launch, McGraw-Hill was wanting to launch a new division of their big corporate universe, and so we helped launch their McGraw-Hill Home Interactive division, and we
Nice.
were the flagship product. So the Pony Express game design was designed such that you had to foil the nefarious schemes of the
Okay.
Knights of the Golden Circle, which was a precursor to the Ku Klux Klan, a Confederate militia that was attempting to take over the territories for the Confederacy.
Yeah.
And of course, they became a footnote in history because they lost the war.
Yeah.
And so, but they were quite serious about stealing money from the mint and getting the Native Americans on the side of the Confederacy. So became a great story to tell while we were playing the game of riding the horse, the first person horse.
Yeah.
So we developed this horse. We had to go to Russia actually at that time. They couldn't figure out how to make an interactive horse in animation.
Yeah.
And so we got the horse, and then we won all these awards for blue screen technology. Because at that time, they didn't even have DVDs. We had to do the whole game on 3 CDs,
All that memory on a
right?
CD.
Right?
Sent across a
So
CD.
we forget how difficult it was to produce this material. Now we have endless memory and endless bandwidth, and so that's how I got into the game design business. And then later on, I developed a game. Came back to New York and I started teaching at a New York Institute of Technology, and they were looking for interdisciplinary projects. And I said, well, I could develop a game prototype for endangered species. I had this idea. And so we did these, won the grant, and we did these games on VR and laptops and mobile and desktop. And the idea was to kill the poachers, or not kill them, but imprison them.
Yeah.
And so we just won. In fact, this past summer, we won an award for the game series.
Oh, amazing.
But, at that time, we could not. We did this in 2012. We started it, and it went through to 2016. But we could not raise money at that time because people didn't understand. My name of my company at that time was Green Kids Media. They didn't understand how endangered species was part of the green movement.
Right. Well, they couldn't connect how
they couldn't understand it. So I think it was a little ahead of its time. And then, of course, the game business is really one that is flush with money for violent games.
Right. Not for ones that
war games. It's not for what you call edutainment games, where you learn something at the same time as you play a game. So that all the money is now going into war games and shoot 'em ups. That's very popular.
Is there nothing for like early development, like games that go into school syllabuses and stuff like that?
There's not really big money in it. Enough to support a total game. You're having to develop it. Developing a game is very expensive.
Yeah.
Because you have to not only, maybe now with all this AI coding, it'll get cheaper, but you have to do all the animation and all the visuals and all the coding and test the game design, and so we just put it away.
Yeah. Well, you look at like GTA, the new GTA.
Right.
Say that's going to cost 2 billion to make, and
Exactly.
Like it's like a 10 times or whatever it is price hike on what GTA 5 made. And you look at how good GTA 5 is. Everyone's saying like, what level of detail they're going to have for $2 billion, and we're in this age now, 10 years on, with all these extra technologies, like you're saying, like how, just the level of detail and how much time.
Yeah. Oh God, it's very labor intensive.
Yeah. What was it like making that game on CD-ROMs? Like, how long did it take? Was there like a certain framework to follow to get them working?
Well, they wanted to get it out for Christmas,
Right.
96. And so we spent a year and a half, close to 2 years, making the game.
Yeah.
And you could see it right now. It was made for Windows 95. So we really couldn't, unless we rewrote the entire game, do it for another Windows, because they weren't back. Windows 95 was an interim Windows. And so we didn't really do another version of it. But you can watch it on YouTube. One of the people who reviewed it for us.
Yeah.
Apparently, there's a whole sub-world of people that like to go back to legacy games that they played when they were young. And they review them. They play them and they review them.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, you can play it and review it and upload it to your review site, but give me a version of your play. So now I have the whole game of his play on YouTube, and you can watch the game in a linear mode.
Yeah.
But we've always wanted to report it so that it could be a mobile game. But,
Mm.
it requires a lot of redoing of all the assets.
Yeah. All the
I
digital.
don't know that the assets would get supported on in this new Windows 11.
Yeah.
uh,
Well, it's crazy, like how certain games won't like I play quite a few games at times. It depends. I'm not like I can't play them for certain times, and then because I have a very addictive personality, so I play very limited amounts. But I do play with my friends quite regularly on the same game. But if I start a new thing, it can just take over my life. So I have to be very careful. Like I'm all for
right, right.
playing with my friends or whatever. But yeah, I've got a very but I always admire it. Like I always look at like how games are made and like how creative they are and the process you have to think to like every slight detail and like especially if it's online or like how you have to look at the frames. Similar to what I want to talk about with you with films, like just how much goes into it because at the moment, Lynn, like in AI art, when people look at an image that's being created, they're very easy, or I'm not saying everyone, but I have seen examples where people are very quick to slander it or quick to say how rubbish it is. But you think like how impressive it is, that's all just off like 5 prompts or whatever. It's like it's crazy. Like you're thinking that's coming to the gaming world and it's coming to
Right.
the film industry like very quickly.
Well, I was very interested in the fact that you could generate animation very quickly and combine it with your own human creativity. So we had in my latest iteration, which was another character in my American series, Sacagawea, she was also a teenager when
Yeah,
she led Lewis and Clark across the Rocky Mountains, across the continent, and back as a Native American girl with her baby. And so we were very interested in the fact that the technology required you to have her speak directly to the camera in order to get the lip syncing working. That became game like. That's how games are, that the character talks directly to you.
yeah,
So we're getting a 21st century aesthetic with a game aesthetic inside of a story that's taking place in the 19th century.
yeah,
So it was interesting to combine those two aesthetics. How do you tell a story that takes place in the 1800s with a 21st century technology?
yeah. That's very
And
tough.
or not only the 21st century technology, but also the 21st century mode of storytelling.
Yeah,
So we were interested because I came from the world of filmmaking and theater. I was trained that you tell a narrative story
yeah,
with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and with actors and with voice, that they speak the dialogue, and every scene has to have a conflict, and
yeah,
everything you have to have relationships between the characters,
yeah,
and so I was much more interested in that kind of storytelling than I was in voiceover zombies or voiceover science fiction or uh, voiceover cars crashing into each other,
yeah,
which is very popular. Those are three very popular uh, storytelling devices.
yeah,
Have zombies or science fiction or warriors. We were interested in telling a really traditional narrative story, and how do we use AI tools to tell a story that's about relationships and about a plot, has a real plot, and the characters speaking to each other. So if you look at AI filmmaking today,
yeah.
so right now, it's mostly voiceover.
Yeah, that's really true. I hadn't thought about that actually. Like how it's and I know there's a lot of focus in games with using AI like for making sure lip syncing's right, but also how the NPC like acts towards the characters. It's a big thing because that's where all the biggest glitches are or things. And I don't know it fully, but it's always interesting why people love certain games, even ones that aren't open world or exploratory, because they've just got such a narrative to follow, like The Last of Us, and it's got turned into a TV series because you play that game and it's so captivating. Like you really get pulled into that, and it's a new, it's
A
almost,
world.
yeah, it's like it reimagined the like world of zombies to a whole nother world. Like, it doesn't focus on the zombies; it focuses on the people that obviously have to navigate the world. And it's obviously probably got, you'll know this better than me, elements of what you're supposed to do in storytelling. But it's the way, instead of focusing on like a manly person, the focus is on the child, the woman, who becomes very empowering and very centerpiece because she can outsmart, like, she's still got that set. I don't know, like that's how it comes across in my head. And now it's obviously a HBO best-selling series, and it's when you play that game, you can see why, because it's like, wow, this is really captivating me, like how they're telling the story.
Yeah, well, that was another element. We were interested in telling a story about a female protagonist, and
Yeah, that's a good one as well.
so oftentimes a female protagonist is not selling in the Hollywood because they have done the research and they have discovered that boys will play games or watch movies with a male protagonist, but not a female. And so that's why we did Pony Express Rider first, because the marketing research was telling us you could get girls, but you can't get the boys. But now it seems that there's more of a willingness to watch stories with female protagonists.
Yeah,
And so in our project, a Bird Woman, we were really interested in focusing on her experience of taking this expedition, uh, across the whole continent and back,
yeah.
and what
How did you?
happened to her.
Yeah. How did you come up with the idea? Like when you were coming up or starting to frame it, to think this is a story you want to tell. How do you put like a story like that into, I don't know, a vision, a creative board process? Like what steps do you go for? I don't know. Like what steps do you go through? Is that
So
completely your?
first, we were interested in the character because she was this all happened 215 years ago, right? And she is still talked about. She was in Knights of the Museum, Knights
Yeah,
at the Museum, the trilogy.
yeah,
And so people all over the world know about her, but they don't really know very much about her. And then she was on,
Well, like you said,
they
I
only
bet.
know her from Knights at the Museum. Or they might know if in America in 2000, they minted a golden coin called the Sacagawea coin.
Yeah, and I know the
Uh,
name, but I don't, like you said, I don't know anything about her. It's a
right?
very grey area. Yeah,
So, and then, she's got a lot of statues of her, more statues in America of Sacagawea than any other female.
wow.
And the reason for that is that when the centennial happened in 1903,
Yeah,
it was 100 years later, it coincided with the women's suffrage movement, which is around the same time. So there suddenly became an interest in Sacagawea, and they built all these statues in 1903, 1904, around that period, because the reason they didn't want to give women the vote was they said, well, you're not leaders, you're not involved in politics, you're homebodies. What do you know about the political world or leadership? And they were claiming that women were very emotional and they couldn't really handle the seriousness of voting. And anyway, they decided that here was an example of a woman leader. And that, so there were lots of reasons why Sacagawea name kept reappearing decade after decade in
yeah,
various forms. They have a lake and a mountain, and they have uh, camps, the Girl Scout camps.
yeah,
So she's in a certain circle. In any case, we decided this was an interesting, undiscovered, unheralded story.
Yeah.
And so I read the Lewis and Clark journals,
Right.
which is a major undertaking to read because they're written in 19th century prose. And they were very bad spellers. Both Lewis and Clark were not great at spelling.
Yeah.
Decade. Many people have taken to the Lewis and Clark journal, so you can read an updated version of it. You can read it online. They break it down day by day. They break it down month by month. So it's a lot easier to read.
Yeah.
So she is mentioned a number of times in the journal.
Got you.
And then when recently, well, it wasn't so recent, but in 2003, there was the bicentennial.
Okay.
And so in 1999, they were planning for the bicentennial. So we went to North Dakota to the tribe, the Mandan tribe held the bicentennial foundation planning committee was there. And so we met all the tribal elders and the historians and Stephen Ambrose, who had written a very famous book on the Lewis Undaunted Courage. And so we decided to investigate further how we could develop the Sacagawea story. And we put together a board of advisors of historians and elders. And we applied to get money from the government. We couldn't get it.
Yeah.
Ken Burns got the money for Lewis and Clark rather than Sacagawea. So I put the whole thing away again. And then when podcasting came into its own as a medium, I decided, well, we could make it as an audio drama. And so I rewrote the entire screenplay as an audio drama, which was 9-episode audio drama. And also it coincided with the Me Too movement. And I said, well, maybe now they'll accept female protagonists. Yeah. And so we decided to record the whole demo. We did an 1.5-hour recording and with actors. And lo and behold, COVID came into the world. And so we could no longer record in the studio because everybody was homebound. So we recorded online. We used the cloud, and all the actors had to learn how to upload their dialogue to the cloud.
Speaking through like protected microphones.
Right. We had to teach them how to make, their own little studio in the house. And some of them had studios at home. They were professional voice actors. Some of them were more used to, filmmaking. Right. So we got Native American actors, and we got actors from England. One of the plays Clark, and he did it with an American accent. And so we decided to cast around the globe as opposed to, because we no longer was stuck in one city recording.
Yeah.
So Lewis is from Texas, the guy that does Lewis, and the Clark is from England, and Sacagawea was in New York, and her brother was in Nevada and Arizona, and so people were all over the globe. That's and cool. So it was fun. Yeah. And so we recorded an 1.5 hours, and people were very interested in working with us because nobody had told this story. So we got wonderful editors, audio editors, and we put together the audio and composers, and the Native American actor recorded wonderful flute music for us, and a regular composer did orchestral music. And so we cut a whole audio drama, an hour of audio drama together. And then I still miss the visual component because I came from the filmmaking business.
Sure.
So when AI came out for the general public, I started investigating it. And I wanted AI that would make motion pictures.
Okay.
So there weren't too many at that time. We're talking about 2 years ago
Yeah, many
that
models
were
out there for that.
developing motion pictures. They were developing images.
Yeah.
So we decided to use this one company, DID, that allows you to import an image of a face and the dialogue, and it will export the characters speaking.
Got you.
And then we decided to use Midjourney to create our characters and our backgrounds. And then we took those scenes
Mm.
and we put them into Runway to make them into motion pictures.
Wow. That's crazy to think just
Right?
before that, like even pre-pandemic or pandemic times, like before the emergencies models, like to break into those areas, like you just
Yes, it
like
was.
we thought it was so automatic then, but like if I look at different functions now, it's just if even if I look at how things were done in 2021, there's certain parts that I'm like, God, that was so like clunky or hard to do, or
Yes.
you'd
Well,
struggle to break into a market, like you'd really struggle.
yeah, well, it only produced 4 seconds of video. Runway could only work on 4 seconds, and everything would pixelate after 4 seconds. Even in 4 seconds, the human body would start pixelating, and it really had a hard time with the human form.
Yeah.
So it would get 6 figures, 3 legs. It didn't really
Hallucinating.
So I always say we were on the bleeding edge.
I like it.
It was very painful. To keep iterating. You had to keep iterating until you found. And then, of course, facial consistency.
Yeah.
It was, and it's still a problem. They still, if you tell it, we want it to look like this. This is our Sacagawea. We want her to always look like our Sacagawea. It can't do it.
Yeah. It won't do it.
So we have to look for other tools we had to find other tools to feed it into to transform the face to be consistent with our face. And
Yeah.
then the same thing was with resolution, because at that time, these Runway was not making a high resolution version of what they were doing. So we had to find software that would bring up the resolution. So we used Kriya and other, huh?
What software did you use? That's what I was going to ask.
To do the high resolution.
Yeah.
Kriya, we used Kriya.
Nice.
We found that was the one that made the best high resolution
Yeah.
version of our, because if you're sending it out, on streaming it on television, you have to have higher resolution. It's one thing to look at it on your mobile phone, but to do it on a TV,
Yeah. You have to.
it's
It's like
you
a
have to have high,
yeah.
and the streamers won't accept it if it's not in a high resolution format.
Yeah, you can't upload it because it won't go. It'll go
Yeah,
too far.
they want, we had to deliver what you call a ProRes version of the film.
Yeah.
It was very, uncompressed.
Yeah. Wow. So how long did it take you then? How, with the team having to do 4 second clips? What was that process like to think just every 4 seconds? Like how many batches were you doing a day or a week? Or because I guess
Well,
you
we
look
would
at it,
iterating, so we would work a scene at a time, right?
yeah.
And then we would finally get something that we like,
Mm,
a piece of 4 seconds that we liked, because for example, there's a scene in the film where she jumps into a squalling river
right.
and she has to retrieve. This is something Lewis and Clark wrote about, that they were so impressed with her that she jumps into this squalling river and retrieves their sextants and their compasses and their journals. And that's one of the events that made her really extraordinarily well known. And so I wanted to do that scene,
Yeah.
really high end. So I revisited it again. I did it once and I didn't like it, and last summer I decided to revisit it. They had some better tools. So you have to tell it, we want the water to move this way, we want the sail to move that way, we want the clouds to be moving that way, we want our hair to move it this way. And so you're telling it each, that's where you have the most control,
Yeah.
is if you can use the motion brush.
Got you. And that's the
Otherwise,
prompting
in
as well.
runway,
Yeah.
otherwise you're constantly having to ask it to regenerate a scene by
Yeah.
itself. And then it keeps changing what it's regenerating.
Yeah.
So, for example, right now we're doing episode 2. We're working on, we're trying to raise money for episode 2. And in episode 2, they finally get to the Pacific Ocean,
Yeah.
the whole expedition. And of course, hoping that there would be boats there so
Yeah.
that they could not have to walk back across the Rocky Mountains
Yeah.
and all
Go
the
back.
rivers, but nobody ever showed up.
Yeah.
I think everybody thought they were dead, because they were supposed to come back in 6 months,
Yeah.
because nobody knew how big the Rocky Mountains were.
Yeah. Or how
They
far
thought
extent.
far or cold it was.
Yeah.
Um, that's one of the reasons why her name Sacagawea means bird woman in Shoshone. And
Right.
so I decided that I would use this animal spirit concept of the Native Americans, and she, through magical realism in our story, turns into an eagle.
Mm. Wow.
So that's the story of Bird Woman. So as Bird Woman, she saves the expedition from starvation and her baby, and they have to climb through the Rocky Mountains in the winter. And
Yeah.
then she finally arrives at the Pacific Ocean, and there's a dead whale there.
Dead whale.
A beached whale. So this is oftentimes common on the Pacific Ocean, that whales will end up beached on the I saw it myself years ago, but in this case, it was on the Washington-Oregon border.
Yeah.
I saw it in San Francisco, a beached whale.
Oh. How come it happens?
I think the whale dies in the water, gets sick, and then the body ends up floating towards the
Right. Yeah.
beach, and then it dies by its own weight on the
Yeah.
beach. It can't swim anymore.
That's pretty crazy. You'd think like it'd get eaten during its journey, like people would just the other fish would just be taking jabs at it, like to
Well,
kill it.
whales are gigantic, so
Yeah.
she wanted to see the whale
Yeah.
because in the Native American religion, they believe they all came from the whale.
Really?
Yeah. So
That's,
she is able to fly inside the whale in our story, become bird woman and fly inside the whale. So we are trying to get Runway to do that.
yeah.
And it's very hard to get Runway, to understand what we want. Not only understand it, but generate it.
Yeah.
But we're playing around with different ProPilot and other Midjourney and other tools to generate her turning into a bird, so we got a wonderful, beautiful new bird she turns into. So it's half woman, half bird.
Okay. Nice. It's got like
So
the wings of a bird, but still keeps the shape of her body, I guess, maybe.
yeah, I mean, slowly she gets feathers. She's full of feathers, and uh, her legs turn into bird's legs.
I like it. I like those kind of plays on imagining what's possible or what fiction, what could happen, and what they believe and stuff.
Right.
What they have. Yeah, it's fascinating.
So, that's what we're trying to get. We're working on now. We're
Yeah.
trying to raise money for episode 2.
How many
because it's a
episodes?
big story.
Yeah. How many episodes do you think it would take to tell the whole story?
That's a really good question,
Yeah.
because it's not only to tell the story, but it's also to raise the money.
Yeah.
So it's, how many episodes can you raise the money for?
Mm.
So right now we're trying to tell a version in 2 episodes. It's actually would take more, but if we could raise the money for 3 or 4 episodes, we could tell the whole story, because it's an amazing story.
Yeah.
It's a great, amazing adventure, because they meet all these tribes as they travel from before the mountains, up in the mountains, and as they come down the mountain, and the Indians tribes are living all along the river's edge there.
Yeah.
And they all helped them.
Yeah. Well, see,
And the
this
reason
whole
that they helped them was because they were traveling with a woman and a child.
yeah.
And so you don't think that if this expedition is traveling with a woman and child, they're going to come and kill you.
Yeah. That's really so they see the different tribes, but this is at the same. And you're making like I'd imagine I'm not American, but I'd imagine it's got a lot of history of America embedded in this story, like how people were navigating such a big country at the time. They didn't know where Canada was, where Mexico, what the border, let alone that, like where certain states were. Like it was all. I'd imagine that like past the 13 colonies at the time, a pretty
Exactly.
unexplored,
Totally
raw, wild,
unexplored.
wild west.
Nobody had done it. Nobody
Yeah,
had done it. And so even the Native Americans had not even done the entire gone across and back.
yeah.
So from all the way from the Mississippi River all the way over the Rocky Mountains. So
That's incredible to think only 200 years ago or 250 years ago we didn't
right,
even know half our planet. Like it's
exactly, right. And there were scores of Native American tribes living there all along.
yeah,
And they all helped in one way or another. So it's really the story of the last peaceful encounter between the first and the last, I think,
yeah,
between the Native Americans and the white man.
yeah. Wow.
And it was helped by this young woman, and that they came in peace, and that they came with guns, because
Yeah,
the natives were very interested in guns.
yeah. Why do you reckon that
Be-
is? What was the
well,
specific?
because they were fighting each other.
Yeah.
And so some of the native tribes had gotten guns from the Spaniards,
Okay. Yeah.
who had been coming up from the south, and they were trading. So the Native American tribes that had guns could force the other tribes up in the mountains to live in the mountains when they couldn't eat, because they were all chasing buffalo. They were living off of the buffalo.
Yeah.
And so if you didn't have a gun, number one, you were afraid of the other tribe. And number two, you couldn't get to your food source if you were
Yeah.
stuck up in the mountain.
Yeah. A lot harder, and you're colder, so you got less options, and pretty much a
Yeah,
death sentence in those days.
right, so it is a death sentence. So they
Yeah.
were starving up there, because all you're eating is berries. I mean, they got so hungry that they were eating bark off the trees.
Wow. I, I'm fairly sure that's got no nutrients in it whatsoever. It's maybe the
You
sap.
wouldn't think so, right? I mean, it's wood, right? It's a form of wood.
Yeah, it reminds me of things like The Revenant, the Leonardo DiCaprio film,
Exactly.
and Yellowstone, obviously in 1923, and the 1823 or whatever it is, 1880.
19, yeah.
Yeah, there's like three
Well,
of them.
exactly. This is a similar time to Revenant,
Yeah,
where he's fighting the animals and he's doing fur trading, because fur trading was the big industry in the time at that
yeah,
time. Because Europeans were very interested in beaver and seal. Well, they used it. Beaver's skin is very thick, and the fur is very thick, and it's water resistant.
So it can be.
So they made the hats, all the Abraham Lincoln hats, the top hats, were all made out of beaver.
It's a lot of beavers put to death for a hat. Yeah.
Definitely. So the whole Astor, you heard of the Astor family?
No.
They built their fortune off of beaver skins.
What are they called? Astra family.
Astor, Astor.
Astra family. I'll look them up quickly.
So the Astors they were one of the first gigantic monopolies to take over the beaver industry by buying everybody else out. So they controlled the price of beaver.
Yeah, well, it says here the family's founder, John Jacob Astor, a German immigrant, amassed a fortune through the fur trade and real estate investments, particularly in New York City. The Astors became known as the landlords of New York due to their extensive real estate holdings, including the famous Waldorf Astoria Hotel and various streets and places named after them. And it says one of them, the prominent member, died on the Titanic, and that inherited a large fortune, William Waldorf Astor, and moved to England, where he became the first Viscount Astor. And it goes all the way down to modern times about how they shaped New York society, British high society, and a lot of focus on real estate all through fur. So
it's all through the beaver skin.
Yeah,
they understood how to form a monopoly. So what was going on was that the French Canadians were living in, her husband, Charbonneau, Sacagawea's husband, is a French Canadian fur trader. And the French came to Quebec with no women. Because they were not interested in colonizing Canada.
Right.
They were interested in making money off of Canada and off of the fur trade. But
they didn't think about having families and kids.
No, nobody wanted to live in the wilderness. So these men would start having Native American wives. And so there's a whole movement in Canada called the Métis movement, which is people who are mixed. Métis means mixed blood. Half Native American, half white. And so her child, Sacagawea's child, is a Métis. It's a half-breed. And so the French were there to get the beaver. And then the English or the Americans were there with originally the East Indian companies were starting it in England to start trade in America. And then when they got to the West Coast, the Russians were there. So everybody was interested in, the Russians were coming from Alaska and down. And so it was a free-for-all, on the backs of these animals. So apparently, I just recently learned that the beaver in Europe were decimated before they came to America. So they needed a new supply of beaver. And so there was a tremendous interest in America for that reason. Plus, they could get seal. Sealskin also has high water resistance. So we forget about the fur trade and how important fur was to human existence.
And what it drove, and how cities and like that, like families of mass fortune were built off these things that today you just wouldn't, that campaigned against almost, but back then
exactly
it was what it wasn't campaigned against because everyone needed it. Like it was a much more now you don't need it, and it's like harmed animals for zero gain apart from fast fashion or something.
Well, Astor understood that if you bought out, you could buy out a whole mountain of traders and underprice everybody else. And so that it enforced everybody to trade with the Astors, and that's how they monopolized the business. So they had a monopoly. They were the first monopoly.
Yeah, first world known monopoly that the world has
Right.
seen. You know, it's yeah. Now you don't really have well, you do have monopolies in a sense. I think you have them much more subtly, especially in like places like energy and things that just it'd almost be impossible to break into. But it's when you look at those things, like certain trades, like what was it, oil trading, like how oil trading started from Wales, and like that book, I forget the book that it's all based on, and like the story, like that's a crazy story to me.
The
Crick
whale trade was a gigantic business.
yeah, you think you'd just go out and harpoon a whale, and sometimes the whale would go rogue and just wipe out a fleet of
Right.
like
Moby Dick.
yeah, Moby Dick. That's what I was thinking of, and that was it's crazy. Like you don't think about those stories as like they were really foundations of how we started trades and how we started things.
Exactly. International trade.
Yeah, like how insurance started apparently for the
All right.
boat
Right.
going across to New York and they sank, so someone insured it, and that's
Right.
the
Exactly.
insurance
Right.
work.
And you could buy stock,
Yeah, that's
and they
yeah.
started the stock exchange off of it.
Yeah, it's it's really interesting to see how you. I want to look at the trailer in a minute, Lynn. But how do like when you're thinking about these creative processes? Obviously, you've got to know from like making the storyline and picking the the people behind the scenes, whether that's screenwriters, voice actors, the story, how to pitch it. Like what what level of or how does it work with having to learn all about it? Because like hearing you speak about all that
It
stuff.
takes a long
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
You have to become an amateur historian.
Okay.
So you have to learn about the history of the Native Americans and the history of the expedition and the history of the Louisiana Purchase and the history of Canada and the French Canadians. And then you have to learn the history of these characters, what happened to them before and after, and Lewis and Clark and Charbonneau and Sacagawea and York. It was the slave to Clark went on the expedition, and then there were 20 some other expeditioners. So you have to learn all of that.
Yeah.
And then you have to figure out, well, where is the drama? Where is the conflict? What is the conflict? And I oftentimes I have been working in historical drama for decades. So I have learned to look for the drama in history. And there
Yeah.
is a lot of drama in history. And it's always wonderful to go back in time and try to figure out where was the conflict and how did they either resolve it or not resolve it
Yeah.
and prevail. And so each scene has to have a conflict,
Yeah.
and the story has to have a story of for my her story is the story the hero's journey, really.
Yeah.
It's the traditional classic hero's journey. She starts out as a young kidnapped abused young woman
Yeah.
who's been brought east by another tribe, stole her from her tribe in the Rocky Mountains. And then she's brought further east, and this French Canadian buys her in a gambling card game and
Yeah.
wins her.
It's
And
terrible.
then he takes her to what is now this tribe where he's living in North Dakota
Yeah.
and impregnates her. And then Lewis and Clark come because Jefferson has bought the Louisiana Purchase from the French. Napoleon, he was busy fighting his wars, so he needed money.
Yeah.
And so that's how they end up at the Mandan tribes, wintering there. And the Native Americans tell them there is no water route. They were looking for a water route. This is how they found America to begin with. They thought they were going to find a water route to China.
Right.
Well, the native tribal elders say there is no water route. You're going to have to go to the Rocky Mountains and get horses.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to trade with these tribes, the Shoshone. And we happen to have a young girl living among us who is Shoshone
Yeah.
and who came east, having been abandoned, abused, and kidnapped, and gambled, and she will help you because
Yeah.
she knows the way, she knows the language, and she won't drink because
Yeah.
drinking was a problem. And so they decide, and she's pregnant, 9 months pregnant at the time.
It's
So
a heavy
Lewis
pregnancy time.
said this was crazy. Take an infant, a
Yeah.
newborn, on a military expedition, and so they do. So that's one of the conflicts. Will they accept her
Yeah.
and her newborn? And then she has to give birth, and she has a horrible birth, and so that's another big storyline. And then um, what happens in the wilderness? They in the wilderness, they're going to be attacked by bears and by tribes, and then they have to negotiate. When she gets to the rock, she has to find her tribe in the Rocky Mountains, and lo and behold, she finds her tribe, and her brother,
Yeah.
by coincidence, by serendipity, has become the chief.
Yeah.
So Lewis and Clark write in their journals that this could have never been imagined by a dramatist. They even used that expression, that this ending would happen where she would not only find her tribe, but her brother would become the chief.
Yeah.
And so each scene has its own set of dramatic conflicts. Will they sell horses to the expedition? Will they kill the expedition?
Yeah.
Should she live? Should she stay at the Shoshones now that she's found them?
Yeah. There's a lot of loose ends
Or
like
should
this.
she, pardon me?
There's a lot of things that can happen. I love it. Like it's like
Right. So
uh,
it's the hero's journey that she suddenly discovers, I am not just this poor girl, but I am a leader, and I am a guide, and I am an interpreter, and I am a survivalist. And she helps them find roots to eat and berries to eat. They didn't know anything about the wilderness.
she's a badass. She knows everything. She's really like
Yeah, the Native Americans really taught themselves about nature,
yeah.
and they understood their relationship with nature, which is a really beautiful perception, that they are one with nature. They believe that their mother is the earth
Yeah.
and their father is the sun, and grandparents are the moon. So they have this familial relationship with nature, that you should care for it and protect it, and it feeds you and it clothes you, because they used every single part of the buffalo. Was for the teepee, was the spoons and forks they made out of the bones.
Yeah.
So they had and then they believed they each had an animal spirit.
Yeah, I've seen that. Like they relate to what animal it is, and is this right? Tell me if I'm wrong. Like the traits of that person is kind of like what they have in their tribe or their group or
Right,
their pack to like lead on and become for that. Like whether it's someone that can trail animals, or whether it's someone that can be a healer, or whether it's someone
right,
that can
exactly.
be more telepathic, like can understand when unfortunate events are likely to happen by monitoring weather patterns or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So they've been, they were living there for thousands of years with nature.
yeah.
So they were passing it down from one generation to the next.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a beautiful religion, and it's beautiful spirituality. And I got very uh, entranced by it.
Yeah.
And you asked me, how did I do it? I don't know how I did it. The thing about it is, you get into the story and you get uh, obsessed with it.
Yeah. It really takes over. Really starts
It
leading.
does. I mean, these people are so become alive for you, because you get to see and understand the circumstances that they're in.
Yeah.
So she comes back. She goes all the way to the Pacific and comes back. And when she comes back, she's no longer the young woman that she was when she left.
Got you.
So she now has to decide what to do now that she no longer feels to be part of the Mandan tribe, and that she's no longer the subservient young slave to her husband.
Yeah.
And so, because he was very abusive, he would beat her, and he had other wives, and so Clark got very smitten with the baby, and he named a famous rock we have in the middle of the country after the child. It's called Pompey's Pillar, and he offers to take the baby, and now a toddler, tr- educate him.
Okay.
And so she decides to go to St. Louis and give up the child to him to be educated because he is half white, the
Yeah.
child.
So that's
And
more like
so,
a Western kind of what we'd perceive now as like a Western kind of way of learning rather than a tribe way of learning.
right,
Going up
because
to
she
what?
sees that they're reading and they're writing and they're using instruments, the sextant, to
Yeah.
tell the stars, and and they have one woman. She
Right.
didn't like the fact that in the native society you could have multiple wives,
Right.
and she didn't want that for her son. She wanted him to have one wife and have be educated, and so she goes to St. Louis and gives the child up to be educated. So that's the the section that we're telling what happens. Why does she decide to do it? How does she decide to do it? I mean, I was trying to imagine somebody giving up their child.
Yeah.
It's a big story. It's a big thing.
It's a big thing that I don't think people want to ever do. Like it's really it's one of those horror stories, like someone having to give up their child, and you hear about it, unfortunately,
Well,
like
she
in all.
decided to do it.
I know that's what I'm saying. Like she must have really felt in her heart like the pros or the benefits or the future for her child
Right,
far
would be
outweighs
much better.
her short-term pain, which is remarkable. It's a crazy thing to do. Not crazy, but it's a very um, yeah.
And this
It's
child ended up becoming an explorer himself and
right.
we went to Germany and France and learned
Wow.
other languages and became so many Europeans would come to America and want to be taken on expeditions themselves for
Yeah.
the rich
Yeah.
princes. So he would lead expeditions for the princes of Germany and France would come here, and there was a lot of interest in Europe about the New World.
Yeah. Well, a lot of money, I guess. A lot of new opportunities for power and wealth, and
Right. So there was a fascination with the Native American, which is what I discovered. So there were painters during this period who would go out into the wilderness and paint the Native American experience and go to England and sell.
yeah, that's crazy. You don't think about that. Like it'd be buying like a Mona Lisa nowadays, like to have that.
Exactly.
Wow.
Oh, it was a big exhibition
Yeah.
in England
Oh,
of
cool.
Native American. You can research it, and
Yeah. Well.
the Queen, and the Queen. I don't remember which Queen it was. Pocahontas
Yeah.
was came before the Queen. They called her a princess. Sacagawea never went to England,
Yeah.
and that's why Pocahontas. They have a painting of her because she actually lived in England for a while, and they painted her. But
Yeah.
Sacagawea, there is no picture of her.
Yeah. That's crazy. Because back then it must have been like a marvel almost. Like you'd not seen a person like that before. Like from
Right.
like it'd be like wow. And we're still fascinated with it today. Like tribes that don't want to be contacted in the Amazon and stuff, and you hear about it, and it's like they're like protected because if you go in there and you pass a disease or whatever, you wipe them out, and they're like a protected.
And that's what happened with smallpox, wiped out most
Yeah,
of the Native American tribes.
yeah, yeah. I didn't know that either. That was the main killer of them, or wipe out.
They came. There's a book called Germs and Guns. The
Yeah,
germs killed more Native Americans than the guns.
yeah. It's
Well,
crazy.
what happened was that smallpox was around since Cleopatra,
Yeah,
and George
so that's what
Washington had smallpox, right?
Cleopatra's like what ancient Greece times, like
Right.
1010. Yeah,
So it would wax and wane,
yeah,
smallpox. But what happened in Europe was when they started domesticating cows,
yeah,
cows would get something called cowpox.
yeah,
And what they discovered was cowpox was a less virulent version of smallpox. So
yeah,
people would give themselves cowpox so that they would be immune to smallpox. So that's how the Europeans uh, prevented outbreaks of smallpox in Europe. But when they came to America, the
yeah,
Native Americans had no immunity
yeah,
to smallpox.
yeah. That's actually crazy. Like to think they knew back then to give themselves a layer of natural immunity by giving yourself cowpox, and you take that to places where they're berry picking, and they've really got to hunt for their buffalo. It's just it'll wipe you out.
So yeah, there is among certain Native Americans, they believe that some of these Europeans would put smallpox viruses on the blankets and
Yeah,
actually
purposely. Yeah,
purposely give them smallpox.
Jesus.
So smallpox is a virus that lives inside the pox. You get little
Oh,
holes of,
yeah,
and what the Native Americans had never seen this disease, and they used to use steam lodges to cure themselves from various diseases. But
really?
with smallpox, if you went into one of these steam lodges, the pus from the smallpox would cause more smallpox.
Yeah,
So you actually gave yourself a worse case of smallpox.
yeah. Oh, that's crazy. It's
So smallpox people don't appreciate how virulent smallpox was because it's basically eradicated now.
well, yeah,
But it
well,
was around and very virulent and
yeah.
would have major outbreaks throughout the centuries.
Well, it's saying here like the epidemic in 1837 was the big one, the Great Plains. Saying how it was done by a steamboat and it was further spread, and yeah, it's Native American culture, particularly in the northern plains, use sweat lodges for ceremonies, purification, and in some cases a form of medical treatment. It's crazy. That's great. Like to think, it makes you think like how good. Like I always see this comparison, like how good we actually have it living today. Like look at us, we're communicating halfway, two different continents, and you just look at the rate of progress. Because living back then, I mean, I've started watching that new Netflix series, and I forget what it's called, like it's to do with the Mohicans, and it just looks brutal. Like I forget what it's called. Um, Netflix series about the Mohicans, and what is it? Not the Last of the Mohicans. It's a new series that's come out, and it's really intense, and it
About
basically
the Native Americans, you mean?
yeah about the Native Americans. It's called American Primeval. So
Oh yeah, I saw it. It was very good.
yeah, and it's I haven't watched all of it, but I'm through it, and it's based in Utah in 1857, and it's yeah, it's to our point, to the point we're saying, like when you say those things, and it's really fascinating. It just makes you think like what a crazy time these guys like Sacagawea and people like that were going through. To you never hear from them. Like you don't know if they're alive. You don't know what they're doing. You might, and 6 weeks later, it's like, oh, you survived, and they're not even surprised. They're like, yeah, of course you will be. Like if you don't hear from someone now for 24 hours, you're like, are you okay?
Right,
Like,
right. It's true.
it's
Right,
bizarre.
because they had no way of communicating. I mean, if you uh, wanted to reach somebody on the West Coast, let's say,
Yeah,
from the East Coast of America, oftentimes, most often they would take a boat and go around the bottom of Latin America to get to the West Coast. That's why the Pony Express was such a big story, because they could travel across the continent. But it was very dangerous to travel across the continent. So the safe way to get mail was by
by rail.
boat. Right.
Yeah, up past Chile and like
And
past Rogoff.
Argentina and up, right. But
It's a long
you
way to send mail. Uh,
so I mean the thing about, and this is pointed out to me by a historian, is that most of the stories, women don't exist in these stories. It was only men that were traveling around. But there had to be women.
yeah,
I mean, otherwise the population would have not increased.
yeah,
Most of these stories have not been told. So that was another reason why the Sacagawea story is such a fascinating story, because we have enough material.
yeah,
And what happened was, and this is also based on my research, is during the centennial in 1903, the Congress sent up investigators from the Bureau of Indian Affairs to find out what happened to her, because there were rumors that said, oh, she went back to the Shoshone tribe and lived to be an elder
yeah,
and helped negotiate big treaties. And then there was another uh, narrative that said, oh, she died in 1812, that a ferryman had put in his journal that Charbonneau was on the ferry with his Native American wife and that she died. So there was a big controversy about whether or not she lived to be an old lady or died at 22. So when this Bureau of Indian Affairs scholar went up there, they said, yes, she did. She came back. And of course, it was 100 years later.
yeah,
And that she helped negotiate a big treaty, which was the Fort Bridger Treaty, and that they even had the medal. They were giving out peace medals. It was sort of like the Olympic medals, they give out now, big medals. And so they exhumed her um, body from the ground
wow,
to try and look for the medal, but they never found the medal. But in any case, they decided that he came back, and it's in the Library of Congress report. You can read. His name was Dr. Eastman, and he was part Native American, part white scholar, and he said that she lived to be an old lady. So there was a whole nother narrative that I was investigating. I'm saying in my story that she's coming back
yeah.
to tell her story, and you have to decide for
I like that.
yourself whether or not she lived to be old or not.
I think that's a good way of doing it. It's like similar to how I'm not saying everything needs to be like this, but the way people can say, "Here's a fact, here's a story, here's what's happened." You tell me what happened. Like instead of having,
Right.
because otherwise you iron out options and other options that could potentially be true, and it always leaves. And also, like with Sacagawea, like how certain stories get fictionalized to like imagine what could be possible or what could have happened. It might not be the truth, but like you see it with a lot of stories. Like look at Batman, like the amount of times he's getting changed up to a different storyline, different. He looks different. He's got a different
Right.
villain. He's got a
Right.
different background. It's a very similar pillar, but like how you display it is what's that version look like? What was she like? What does Sacagawea actually do? Like all these things that I don't know if you agree with that or not, but like how people can do that in film and storytelling to like to give you a different perspective of the same character.
Right. Well, that's what dramatists do. They make things up. And so that you can
Interpret it the way you want.
you could dramatize it better. Sometimes, you can't, nobody really knows for sure what's happening.
Yeah.
There's a lot of holes in stories in history.
Yeah. Any stories that come to your mind in particular, or yeah, that one you came across recently.
I don't know. I mean, uh, we don't really, so for example, the Titanic, you don't really know what really happened when all these people were dying.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, James Cameron told a great story. Whether or not these people died the way they portrayed in the movie or not is
Yeah.
questionable, right? And these characters, are invented characters that he used to tell the story of Titanic. Some of them are real, based on, but the main characters were invented.
Yeah.
So,
That's a really good example because there's I remember I saw a conspiracy theory on it, or a theory of like say conspiracy, but it's basically like what actually happened during the sinking, like how the people who was on board, and there's
right,
this theory that people say it was almost sabotage because there was that really wealthy family on board, and there's all like, I don't know, like I don't know if that's got part fact to it or part not, but there was some really wealthy families that died
definitely.
on that journey, like very wealthy families. Yeah, and you wonder why.
Exactly. And it was
Yeah,
supposed to be the ship that never sank. It was supposed to be the great technological revolution of shipbuilding
yeah.
in its
Wow.
time.
Yeah. So should we watch this? Do you want to watch the trailer? Do you mind if we put it on?
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'll just share it quickly, and I haven't seen it yet, so I'm really excited to see it. So I'm gonna just pull this up onto my screen, and then we'll go. Let's watch it. Can you hear that?
I don't hear it now.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Connection. I don't know why it's not buffering.
Bandwidth.
I'm just gonna let it buffer for a second, but it's looking pretty. It's pretty cool how you got all these visuals that are coming through and um, like telling the story that it's got from just images and just that visual. It's really cool. Then
Thank you. Well, we won 12 film festivals so far.
wow, 12. That's incredible. That's actually incredible. How
Some for animation, yeah.
yeah,
Some for Native American heritage.
that's pretty crazy. It's a interesting story. Like it gives away things that you want to know more about, but it doesn't reveal all of it. So it's yeah, that's really cool.
Well, that's the idea of a trailer, is to get you enticed, right?
Yeah, when you say it like that, I mean when I was thinking it through in my head, I was like, "Hi, mate." It leaves me thinking like it's supposed to. The cliffhangers of like I kind of can see picture the story of what's going to happen, but to how it can play out for a whole episode and what the characters are going to be like and where the curveballs are going to be and what that aspect is. It's really cool.
Thank you.
And you said 12 awards.
Yeah, well, we submitted it in America and in Australia and in England and in India, and these are places that you would not think they would be interested in this story, some of them. And then we submitted it to, there's a group of Iranian women who are in the diaspora, that are trying to make films about women, and we submitted it there, and we were semifinalists there. So it was all a sudden surprise of film festivals that loved it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, you can see here, like, I'll just share it. I'm looking at it now. Um, you can see there for everyone watching the trailer because for some reason it wasn't buffering, which is my mistake. But you can see a trailer to watch yourself and to see the visuals behind it, which is beautiful, like the different rocks and um, the awards that you've got for it, and also all the cast as well, which is really cool to see how they all work together. Was it fun? How much fun was it working with all the cast?
Right, and Simon Johns is the fellow that lives in England.
Um, yeah, how did it all take part? Like how to cast everyone and to bring everyone into the film?
Well, I went to NYU School of the Arts, and these are all the editors. And I called them up and I asked them to recommend some people. We were looking for somebody who could speak French too. So Jack was one of the people that were recommended. And then I just did a call out and they have backstage, has an online website. And then one of the actresses, Trezana Beverly, and I had gone to graduate school together. She plays the Hawk, and she's a tremendous voice actor. So she did a lot of the voices for us. And she recommended one of her former students to play York. So it was word of mouth and just looking for people. And one would recommend the other. That's how it goes.
Yeah,
And when actors, they recommend each other. And, sometimes we use social media to get the editors. Or, there's apps out there, Freever, I can't remember the name of it, there to find the editors.
yeah, to bring them in and to start making
Right.
a group project. That's really cool. It's really cool. How does it compare when you're making this, Lynn? Like compared to what you've done before? So say you've been on like making something like this with AI compared to something that's a screenplay. Or I noticed that you were doing screenplays and the letters of Ben Reitman and Emma Goldman and these different things. Like how does it compare? Or what's
Well, Ben and Love Ben, Love Emma was based on a story that I had won a grant from the Writers Guild of America Foundation to write an original screenplay. And I found these love letters. I decided to do the story of Emma Goldman, who was a political figure in the turn of the 20th century. And I found her love letters. Her lover, his family, had donated them to the University of Chicago, and I went there and I was shocked.
yeah,
It's a very intimate thing to read somebody's love letters.
yeah,
And I had no idea that this erotic love affair was going on between them.
yeah,
And they used all this purple prose to describe their various sexual parts and encounters. And so I decided to rewrite the screenplay as a play because I originally came from the theater. Got my master's fine arts in theater directing.
nice,
But so I wrote it as a play and we developed it through staged readings, and then we got it produced by Lucille Lortel, one of the major off-Broadway theater producers. And so that was a play, but it was also the story of taking historical facts and rewriting them to make it into a drama. And so in that sense, I learned how to tell a story through history by doing Love Ben, Love Emma. And um, so it's very similar about the historical part. And you finding in that case it was about the America entering World War One,
wow,
and she came out against conscription for World War One. World War One was not a popular war in America,
yeah,
and not like World War Two, and so there was a big anti-war movement, and she got caught up in that. Plus, she was involved with birth control and free love movement. I don't know if you know what the free love movement was,
no, I
but
don't.
but it was, the Bohemians and the. Uh, have you seen the movie Reds?
No, I
No.
haven't. No.
Well, Warren Beatty plays this character goes to Russia, and there's a whole movement in the early part of the 19th century where they were saying that you didn't have to be married, that you could have free love, that uh, you didn't have to be confined to the conventions of the day, and women should explore their sexuality and liberate themselves from the confines of marriage, and um, they didn't have much opportunity then. So it was really a bohemian movement there, and she got wrote about that, and yeah, that's read. She actually, Maureen Stapleton plays Emma Goldman in that movie, and she won an Academy Award for playing Emma Goldman. But I'm telling the story of a younger Emma Goldman, who you can see it on my uh, Amerikids website under theater, under projects.
Okay.
And so we did it as a play up in Connecticut, and then later on I redid it again where I directed it in '09. And then but something like that it wasn't commercial enough
Yeah.
because we're telling the story of these bohemians, and um, so we decided to, after decades of doing research and development, I decided it was time to put it away for a while. And uh, other projects are, like, for example, when we were doing the games project, the endangered games, I suddenly revealed to me that animation, especially 3D animation, was
Yeah.
very intensive labor for an animator to make a 3D object or a 3D person, and then to first create them and then get them to move and get them to interact with other 3D objects and people. And so I just was amazed at the amount of energy that it was taking, the pre-AI.
Yeah.
And if you look at animated movies, you could see there's hundreds of animators working on these films because it requires all of that talent to make an object in 3D and then move, and the background moving in 3D and the lighting. And
Yeah.
um,
I can't believe
so
how much work that would take. Like you look when you see the film credits, it's just like
that's right.
ongoing. It's just like, and there's like a bulk where they got past the main people, and then it's literally like 3 lines, and they're just like
Right,
crammed in. It's like it
exactly.
must be 500 people in there. Like it's
So there's the special effects, and then there's the rotoscoping, and there's motion capture, and there's all this different iterations that the story has to go through in order to make an animated movie. So when AI came around and you could do this with a few tools and just keep iterating, it was a major uh, breakthrough in for independent filmmakers.
yeah,
So, if you're Disney, you have the money to make one of these animated motion pictures. But if you're an independent and you want to tell a story and you don't want to have to go raise hundreds of millions of dollars,
yeah,
that's where AI comes into play here.
yeah,
And that's why we were so excited by doing this in AI.
yeah. Well, you should definitely. I'll see if I can connect you with them. But like people like Chris and that world, like they are creating like real cinematic films and stuff. Like not criticism, but his network is, and it's like they do an AI watch party every Thursday, and like you see some of the stories that are coming out on that. It's well worth having a go and looking back, Lynn, because you can see like what they've put in it, and like just how they sometimes do behind the scenes, and you can see like what kind of films are, of like how creative they are, what the angles are, like the visions, the visuals. It's crazy. And you think, like, just 10 years ago, 5 years ago, to get that kind of production, you just couldn't have dreamed of it. Like, it wouldn't be possible. And now it's very possible, and it's becoming faster and faster, and the models are getting quicker and quicker at learning. And you're starting to see it in adverts, like in KFC's advert, in films. People are saying they've actively used it to make actors younger or to imagine scenes that were very hard to film. Like, you just couldn't get the quite thing. And then you've also got people like I think it's Chris Nolan that refuses any sort of CGI where he can help it. Like if he can make a studio, like they showed behind the scenes of Inception, like that stair, the elevator section is it like they created this whole tunnel where the actors said they felt physically sick for days on end because they had to
Right.
keep shooting this thing.
Right.
It does make you think.
Well, it's a different style, okay? AI has its own style of storytelling and its own style of animation. And, we wanted human creativity. We were using it as an animation tool.
Yeah,
We weren't really, and that's where the big lumping together of AI as some sort of nefarious uh, genre that's going to destroy filmmaking and destroy people's careers is really a false narrative because it's a tool, just like computer generated effects is a tool that we've gotten very used to, right? We
yeah,
used to watching Spider-Man jump from building to building. Well,
yeah.
no actor is doing that. That's all computer generated effect.
Yeah, jumping onto a
And
mouse. Yeah,
so that's what AI gives you. It gives you the ability to generate images, like you say, that couldn't be done in real life. So if we wanted to tell the story of Sacagawea, the expedition in the wilderness and climbing the Rocky Mountains, we would have to probably travel like um, other films go to Argentina, to the mountains in Argentina, and start filming there. And that's why they cost so much money. You've got to take a whole crew to the mountains of Argentina. You can't do it in the Rocky Mountains here. First of all, there's so much development now.
yeah,
There is nothing that will say 19th century, early 19th century anymore.
yeah.
There's electric lights and there's cars and there's highways, and it doesn't exist. The story that I'm telling of early 1803, that America of 1803 does not exist anymore.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's so hard to capture what that must have been like back then. Yeah,
They built dams and they built bridges and they built roads now. I mean, people were traveling by water because that was the only way you could travel. You couldn't barely travel by land.
yeah. There was no steam engines or anything, or the train.
There were no steam engines. There was no electricity.
Yeah,
uh,
you can't picture that. Like how to get across America. I remember watching what is it, Lenny and Mice and Men, like the whole thing of like going to California, and it was I've forgotten the story, but it was obviously what I read as a kid, and you know, even a story like that, like I think that was a bit later on. You just I can't imagine like what I see of I've never been to California. I've been to Austin, I've been to
right.
Houston, New York, Miami. I've been to a fair few places. But like what I'd imagine LA is and San Fran, like trying to reimagine what that was like undiscovered. It's like I just can't picture it.
No, right. It was all desert and plains, and there
Yeah.
was buffalo roaming all through the plains. There were millions,
Mm.
literally millions of buffalo. They would have to. Lewis and Clark wrote about how they had to wait for hours for the buffalo herds to pass.
Because it was that big a flock, like all
Yeah,
over.
and there were millions of other animals, elk, and the whole country was full with animals.
Yeah.
elk and all these, a lot of these prairie dogs, they had never seen a prairie dog before. They don't even exist anymore. So wolves and bears, and the place was filled with animals.
Yeah. And just
And beaver and moose, and the place was overrun by animals.
yeah. And now it's overrun by humans building big bridges and big
Right.
cities.
So you can't get that. You can't recreate that anymore. I mean, Dances with Wolves, he had one scene where the buffalo are there's crossing the screen.
Yeah.
But there are certain farms now where they uh, have buffalo, that they're trying to increase the buffalo herds, but they don't roam freely anymore.
Do you remember do you remember the first time, Lynn, that you went on like a movie set and you thought this is what you're gonna get into and what you want to like create and do and follow? Like, what was that turning point to think like compared to what you're seeing now, like you were describing with AI and stuff, like what the differences is? Because I'm looking at your thing about Love Ben Love Emma in 1984, and I'm curious to how that's be like how you've seen it like from your first time ever setting on a set or seeing a script or whatever it was through to now where you're making videos with AI.
Well, you could look on our page about Pony Express Rider. I have some of the green screen shots there, because we have a scene where uh, the Native Americans are in the scene, but we had to have this green screen graphic background in order to show them in the wilderness.
Yeah,
And so when we shot Pony Express Rider, it was on a soundstage in LA, and we used green screen.
yeah,
This was like 1995, 96. Yeah, so all of this, if you see these characters,
yeah.
some of them are graphic backgrounds, and some of them are live action characters. They're speaking on, yeah, so if you look at this, so the character speaks. So this right here, right now, you see he's a live action character on a
Yeah.
graphic user background. This is the same. Uh, so we had the way that the technology worked at that time, the actors could only move in a certain small rectangular universe
Right.
in order to capture the graphic user interface with the live action. So that was what we were forced to do at that time in order to get a live actor on a graphic background.
So
And
like that person there, I've messed it up 'cause I took it off, but the gentleman that was sat down, that'd be in a very confined spot where you'd have to literally capture it at that angle. Is that right?
right, exactly. And
Right.
he was told, you can't move, you can't get out of the chair.
Yeah.
You can only stay within a certain small area of length and width.
Yeah. It's a very specific
And
range.
so we were able that with that technology at that time, with green screen, we were able to put that live action character in a graphic background.
Yeah.
And so all the characters that you see that are live action, they're all acting in a green screen studio.
Yeah.
So and then all of this was drawn. All of these graphic. These are Pony Express stations. So we had to imagine, what does a Pony Express station look like, and then they all have to be interactive.
Yeah. And they've all got their own
So
thing.
you hit the guy, or you hit the letter, and it opens up, or you hit one of the objects, and so if you hit the letter on the desk there,
Yeah.
for example, you will have to read the letter, or
Oh,
any one of these characters. If you hit the character, he will turn around and speak,
got you.
or look up and speak. So in order to end the scene, the guy in the big hat had to put his head down so
Ah.
that, we could end the scene where he talks.
So you couldn't have it so he just finishes. Like that's crazy. To think the capture would have to literally have it so the camera can't even spot him anymore or interact with him.
Yeah, well, that was the technology that we were able to incorporate and also put it on a CD.
Yeah.
So if yeah, you can see here the Indians. They're really behind a blue screen. We made it blue here, but and there is the animated horse. You can't see him right now, but that was a different technology. The horse technology was all animation. So there was animation combined with blue screen. You could see the Native American talking to the elder. That's
Yeah.
that's green screen or blue screen here in this case. So compare that to AI, which is
So,
totally you're generating a whole face moving and a whole background. Well, the background we moved, but you're generating the graphics of the background. You're generating the face. So the
yeah.
bodies are oftentimes in AI are very difficult to generate,
Yeah,
believe it
that's
or
very
not.
true. Because I've seen so many photos and images where they can't get those details right. Like they really struggle. Like still, it's you have to
Exactly.
prompt it and prompt it and prompt it. You have to just keep narrowing it down. Yeah, it's a really good point.
So that's why, sometimes if you use motion capture where
Yeah,
and then you put a skin on it. And even all of that technology is very time consuming and even with AI, but
yeah,
even more so with traditional animation.
yeah. I can imagine.
So you've got to feed it in and then put a skin on it.
Yeah, and well, it makes me think like how you think the tools I can use today, Lynn, and they cost like $20 a month or something. I use this Veed. It's an okay tool, and I used it, and all of a sudden I got my dad speaking Mandarin, me speaking Japanese, French,
Right.
Spanish, and German. None of which I speak German to a fairly okay degree, but it was uh, it was crazy to see that just within half an hour it had done that. And then another one, I gave it a script and it had created a whole deep fake of me. And you think with this video here, like after in editing, I can put green screens on, I can do X, Y, Z, I can render the video so the pixels are better. Like you can do all sorts. And you think it's to put that into a film or whatever, what it must be making people. And I don't think like a lot of industries that say AI is going to get rid of jobs. I don't see that. I see it that people using AI will probably take your job because they'll have more tools available to them. It's like if a business was trying to compete with that internet today, it could be a dumb idea because you'd think, well, they're on the internet, you're not. They're reaching potentially a billion people. You're reaching a very local market, and even that, a local delicatessen. They've still got a very good stronghold in a local market because I'll definitely go and get a sandwich to net from them rather than some big chain. And I know a lot of people that use that movement. But my point is with film and stuff, it's I just can't picture myself wanting to watch an AI generated actor. I still want to see the voice actors behind it. I still want to see the actors that have the talent to bring that creative process. It's I don't know, just from a user perspective.
Right. Because you want to, if it's, let's say, Leonardo DiCaprio, if you're generating an image of Leonardo DiCaprio and him speaking, it's not the same as actually seeing him. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I
Well,
think
that's where AI is getting themselves in trouble
yeah,
because they're copying an image of a person
yeah,
and they're using his voice. And that's why there's this anti AI group of people that are saying, you're stealing somebody's image, you're
yeah,
stealing somebody's voice, you're stealing somebody's AI copyrighted uh, style.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of finessing that has to get done to make AI acceptable and not feel like, it's a mechanism to steal other people's intellectual property.
Yeah. I think
So I think they have, to prove themselves that they're not really stealing other people's images. So we made all the we don't, there's nobody. This Sacagawea, Lewis and Clark are original images. They are not pictures of somebody else
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
we took.
That's good though. That's what you want to see. That's what you want to see
Right,
on
you
it.
want to see an original. I mean, for example, we knew that William Clark was a redhead,
Yeah.
and so he was always referred to by the natives. They had never seen a redheaded person, so they
Yeah.
were quite fascinated with the red hair.
Yeah.
And so we wanted a redheaded Clark. But if you look at the original picture of Clark, they had a painting of him done. At that time, there was no photography. People would have paintings. If you were a rich person, you got a painting of yourself. But
Yeah.
that Clark was really not very interesting to modern audience.
Yeah.
That painting from the uh, early, 19th century.
Yeah.
So we decided we would make him look like a modern redhead
I like it.
guy.
It's a good play on it.
Right,
It's like how they in Australia. I went to Australia and up in the Northern Territories, you'll find a load of Australians or Aboriginals with like blonde hair and ginger
right,
hair because of where or ginger hair I think because of the Dutch that came in and never colonized it, but they just got to the top part and then left for whatever reason, and they said it's a real weird fascination. But my point being, like, how you get these, like, you really made me think about that point. How shocked they must have been to see people with ginger hair. Like, what is this? Like, how's that possible? Like,
right.
yeah,
And also, they were shocked to see a black man. They had never seen a black man, and so they thought he had extraordinary powers because black. They would paint themselves black during fighting, wars. And the warriors would paint themselves with black stripes to make themselves more powerful.
yeah,
So they thought that this guy was painted black.
that's so interesting because they
So it
they
was really an early encounter with the different races and the different ethnicities. And people were at that time just curious
mm,
as opposed to, well, I got to kill you because you're black
yeah.
or you've got a red hair.
And how did, like, when you looked at this, Lynn, when you were like doing research for the story and building it, like, what's their sense? Because it's kind of mentioned, and I'm not saying it's a good. I haven't done the research, and I've only seen very limited amounts. But obviously, you don't really see people from that part of history in the world much more. Like, they're not like those areas, like up where all the cowboys have taken over, and it's kind of mentioned in Yellowstone in 1923, where because of the Industrial Revolution, it's kind of removed their not removed their history, obviously, but as much there's not as many people from that background anymore. Like, I don't know if that's the right way to look at it, but like, how's it all changed, or what was their view towards it when you meet people from this kind of history? I don't know if I'm even
Well,
saying that.
there's there's still, originally there was about 150 different tribes on living on the continent. Uh, yeah. But so many of them consolidated. So, for example, the Mandans, they are now called the three affiliated tribes. So
Okay.
they took three tribes and they decided to affiliate themselves with each other. So they're now one tribal entity called the three affiliated tribes. And the same in the Rocky Mountains. So there are There were smaller, there was the Lemhi Shoshone and the Eastern Shoshone and the Northern Shoshone. I don't, they're very small populations now,
Yeah.
and they were in trouble then, and they're still in trouble. But because of their location, it's a very rough neighborhood in top of the Rocky Mountains.
Yeah.
And so, but they are here. They have not disappeared. They are just, because of what happened throughout history, they're either living on the reservation, or they're living mixed in, assimilated into the American landscape.
Yeah.
They do affiliate themselves with tribes. Those who know enough about their tribal history that they
Yeah.
can say, well, I am still Lakota, or I am still um, Chippewa, I'm still Shoshone.
That's
So
awesome.
some of them have just become so, they don't really know. They could be mixtures of tribes.
Mm.
But in Canada, it's much more powerful. The tribal world, they call themselves First Nation peoples.
Right.
And they are much more powerful in Canada than they are in the States.
Ah, I never thought of that.
So, this Canada America divide was not something that existed only after the English came and divided the continent. But they used to travel from Canada down to the plains to run after the buffalo, because they moved with the buffalo.
Yeah. And they went with them, and wherever they went,
Right,
that's their source of food and income and local economy, probably. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the tribes from the plains would do that. The tribes in the east were more settled farmers. They would build earthen huts, or they'd build lodges. So, for example, the Mandans lived in what they called earthen huts. They would build a hut inside the earth. Or the people from the east would build large lodges. They called them long lodges. If you look at any of the Pocahontas stories, you could see how they're all living in these big lodges, and they would form confederations. So they became, all the tribes would in the neighborhood would confederate with each other so that they could trade and survive more easily.
Yeah, that's so interesting to see how it all. That's so interesting, like how they've got. And I think it's beautiful that they've still got that kind of history to knowing what their ancestors came from. I mean, it's pretty remarkable when you think I don't like I don't know much past my grandparents. Like, there's very little I know, and you think like it's quite embarrassing to be honest. Like, you think like my parents, I know a fairly bit further ahead, but like you compare it to someone like the Romans, they would know people like from 1,000 years. Like, it was really tied into who they were, and everything was in honor. And it's similar to what you're explaining here, where they know like what large groups of people were, not just their own family line. They knew who their tribe was, who their community was, and it like transpires into the people they hang around with today. It's crazy.
Right. Well, the tribal lifestyle, the tribal community that kept people together.
Yeah, kept you alive. Yeah, well, it's fascinating. I feel like I could talk about this for ages and see where it goes and whatever. But yeah, it's been really fun, Lynn, to talk to you about
Yes,
all this.
definitely.
I feel like I've taken a lot of your time because I could keep going on and on. But is there anything else you wanted to mention or say
No,
just
I
before?
mean, people are interested, they can go to our website, Amerikids, AMERIKIDS, and search around. And if they want to contact us or get involved with episode 2 or
Yeah,
episode 3, we are looking for partners.
awesome, awesome.
So
And
if
I'll
you
share
know
it.
anybody,
Yeah, I'll share it around because I know a few people who'd be interested that definitely are in this world of production with AI, and I'll send you some videos after this, and they're crazy some of the videos they're making. But I know when I reached out to you and I saw your message, I really love what you're doing, Lynn, and I think I did sharing that
Well,
link to the
what I
page.
might mention is that we also made chatbots of each
Yeah,
character. You could go on the Americans page and ask the characters anything you want about their life or their experience, and they will talk back to you and tell you, yeah, chat with the explorers, right? If you
amazing.
hit that link. Yeah, so there's Bird Woman, or you can talk to Clark, or you could talk to Lewis, or you could talk to her in Spanish.
That's pretty crazy. And you can chat to Lewis as well.
Yeah, or Charbonneau,
Yeah, and you can just
and
that's
hit
right.
and ask him any question you want.
Yeah.
So this is also, we've been using AI agents,
Okay.
giving them a knowledge base, and we give you 3 beginning questions, and then you can either talk or um, type a question.
Yeah, amazing. And then you can rate it as well.
So we've been using this in museums and libraries and schools,
Yeah.
and also has audience engagement. So
Nice.
people are curious. It's funny that some of the people want to ask Charbonneau because he's the evil character.
Yeah.
Questions like why do you beat your wife?
They want to ask proper
How
insight.
long has it been since you stopped beating your wife?
Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't look like a great, a nice guy.
So, if they're curious after the movie and they want to know something more, we put a whole knowledge base up about each character and their past and their uh
That's amazing to see how you've built it, especially as it goes into universities and everything. I've just opened up this one as well, so you can see in Charbonneau.
yeah.
It's interesting, but like quickly, I know, I don't want to keep more of your time, but how does that work? Like going into universities and building it out, because I could see that as proper valuable for the future of history and stuff. Like when I was learning at school, if I had these sort of tools to speak to people in, I'd take in so much more because I'd just be generally curious. Like, wow, like let me ask you this, let me ask you this. I can learn on my own pace, right?
Right, and it's fun
Yeah,
because these people have come back from 215 years ago to answer your questions.
yeah. Quite
And
ridiculous
so
as
that's
well.
fun. And so we did it in the first person. They talk to you in the first person and they tell you anything you want to know. And well, my university where I teach solicited for leveraging an AI proposals, leveraging AI in education. And I had this idea, well, we could make these chatbots and then we could use them both for audience engagement for as a marketing tool and also for teaching the subject matter, whether it's in the schools, it's part of curriculum, westward expansion, Native Americans, Lewis and Clark are all required curriculum. And so the university was very excited by what we were doing. And the students, I have a lot of computer science students and business students that
Nice.
were really interested in. So I have 7 interns working with me now to help me make
Oh, that's
these
awesome.
chatbots.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to. I'll be testing them out. I'll give you some feedback
Okay,
on them.
that would be fun.
Yeah.
So your
Well,
audience is welcome to test them as well.
awesome. I'll put them in the show notes and I'll send it out to a few people and see what people think. But Lynn, real pleasure on having you on today.
Okay,
I really
my
appreciate your
fun.
time.
It was really fun. Thank you,
Yeah.
Tom.
Thank you. See you later,
I'll
everybody.
speak to you soon. Good night.